The mystery of the letters. Elena's days were quiet and steady, much like the little bookstore where she worked. Nestled along the river in a quaint town, the shop was a peaceful sanctuary filled with the smell of old paper, wooden shelves brimming with well-loved books, and a bell that softly chimed whenever a customer entered. Elena had always felt at home there, surrounded by the worlds captured in ink and paper. But her ordinary life took an unexpected turn one crisp autumn afternoon. It was the beginning of October, and the leaves by the river had turned shades of deep red and burnt orange. Elena had just closed the shop and was enjoying a quiet walk along the riverbank when she noticed something unusual. A small, folded piece of paper was tucked between two rocks along the path. At first, she thought it was litter, but something about the way it was placed made her curious. She bent down, picked it up, and unfolded it carefully. The paper was slightly weathered, and the handwriting inside was elegant and careful, almost as if each letter had been placed with purpose. Intrigued, Elena began to read. My dearest, I write to you, though I may never have the courage to speak these words aloud. There is not a day that passes when I do not think of you and the life we once dreamed of sharing. I had to leave, but I left my heart behind, hoping you would find it and know that I never truly left. Yours always. The words were beautiful, filled with longing and sorrow. They seemed to speak of a love lost but never forgotten, and the more she read, the more Elena's curiosity grew. Who was this M? And who had this letter been meant for? She looked around, almost expecting to see someone watching her, someone who might step forward and explain everything. But there was no one else on the path. That night, Elena lay in bed, her mind racing with questions about the letter. She had read hundreds of love stories, but this was the first time she felt as though she had stepped into one. The letter seemed almost like a piece of a puzzle waiting to be solved. She wondered if there were more letters hidden along the path or if the letter was a lone fragment of a long-lost romance. Before she fell asleep, she decided that she would return to the river the next day to search for clues. The following afternoon, Elena closed the shop a bit early and hurried back to the riverbank. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the water. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the ground, hoping to spot another letter. After about 20 minutes of searching, she almost gave up, feeling a bit foolish for expecting to find another note. But then, tucked in a crevice along the riverbank, she found a small envelope, nearly hidden by leaves. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it, revealing another letter in the same elegant script. I don't know if you will ever find these words, but they are my way of leaving a trail back to you. I couldn't stay, and I couldn't ask you to follow. But in my absence, I leave these pieces of myself, hoping that someday they might find their way to you and remind you of what we once shared. Always, M. The letter was shorter but held the same haunting sense of love and regret. Elena's heart ached as she read it, and she felt an almost inexplicable desire to learn the story behind the words. Why had M left, and who was he writing to? She took the letter home, her mind buzzing with questions. Who were these people? What had separated them? And why had M chosen to leave this trail of letters along the river? Over the next week, Elena visited the river every evening after work, hoping to find more pieces of M's story. Her determination grew with each step, and though she felt slightly foolish searching the path each day, her curiosity kept her going. Then, one chilly evening, she found a third letter. This one was hidden beneath a flat stone, and her heart raced as she opened it, eager for another glimpse into this mysterious love story. Our time together may have been brief, but it filled my heart with a lifetime's worth of memories. There are times when I wonder if I made the right choice in leaving, but I remind myself that it was for your sake as much as mine. Perhaps one day you'll forgive me for not staying, for not being strong enough to hold on. Until then, these letters are all I have to offer. Always, M. The letter left Elena feeling a strange mix of sadness and longing. The words felt personal, as though they had been meant for her. It was as if M had become a friend, someone she understood despite never having met him. She wanted to know his story, to understand what had led him to make such a difficult decision. As she tucked the letter away, Elena felt a new determination take root. She was no longer content with simply finding the letters. She wanted to know M's story, to understand why he had left and who he had left behind. Little did she know that the final letter would reveal more than she could have imagined and change the course of her own life forever. The search for M. Elena's curiosity had morphed into a quest. Each letter was like a breadcrumb leading her deeper into a story that felt more real with every word she read. Over the next few weeks, she scoured the riverbank every day, her anticipation growing with each discovery. But as the days turned into weeks, the letters became fewer, and Elena began to wonder if she would ever find the answers she sought. One dreary evening, as the rain drizzled softly against her window, Elena decided to take a different approach. She pulled out a notebook and began jotting down everything she had learned from the letters. She noted the emotional tones, the longing in M's words, and how they hinted at a past filled with love and difficult choices. It dawned on her that she needed to speak to someone who might know more about M. The next morning, armed with her notebook and a sense of purpose, she visited the local cafe that sat near the river. The cafe was a hub for the townsfolk, and she thought someone there might have a clue about the mystery. As she entered, the warm aroma of coffee and pastries enveloped her, soothing her nerves. She approached the barista, a friendly woman named Lily, who had worked at the cafe for years. "Hi, Lily! Do you have a moment?" Elena asked, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Of course, Elena! What's up?" Lily replied, wiping her hands on her apron. Elena explained the letters, sharing snippets of their content and the emotions they conveyed. As she spoke, she noticed the spark of recognition in Lily's eyes. "You know, I've heard stories like that before. There was a young man named Marco who used to come here. He wrote beautifully and often left little notes for someone special, but he left town a few months ago." "Marco!" Elena exclaimed, her heart racing. "Do you know where he went?" Lily shook her head, her expression somber. "I heard he moved to a bigger city for work. But the way he talked about the girl he loved, it was clear she meant everything to him." With this new information, Elena felt a renewed sense of hope. Perhaps finding Marco could help her unlock the full story behind the letters. "Do you know how I might be able to reach him?" she asked. "I'm afraid I don't have any contact information, but I know he loved visiting the old library in town. He often mentioned that it was his favorite place," Lily said thoughtfully. "You could try looking there." Elena thanked Lily and rushed to the library, excitement bubbling in her chest. The library was a charming old building filled with towering shelves, creaky wooden floors, and a scent of old books that reminded her of her own bookstore. She scanned the aisles, hoping to find a clue or, better yet, Marco himself. As she wandered through the aisles, she stumbled upon a small study room in the back. There, sitting alone at a table, was a young man with dark hair, scribbling in a notebook. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She approached cautiously, unsure of how to begin. "Excuse me," she said softly. The young man looked up, his deep brown eyes locking onto hers. "Are you Marco?" He blinked in surprise. "Yes, I am." "How do you know my name?" Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I found some letters by the river. They were written by someone named M. They mentioned you, and I was hoping to learn more about them." Marco's expression shifted from curiosity to a mix of surprise and concern. "You found M's letters?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think anyone would ever read them. Why did you leave?" Elena asked gently, sensing the weight of unspoken emotions behind his question. He sighed deeply, looking down at his notebook. "I had to. There were things in my life I needed to sort out, and I didn't want to hold her back. But every day since, I've regretted it. M was my heart, and leaving felt like tearing a piece of myself away." Elena could feel the pain in his words, the longing and regret that had seeped into every letter. "Do you think she still thinks about you?" she asked, wanting to understand the depth of their connection. "I hope so," Marco replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I left those letters in hopes that one day she might find them. I wanted her to know I never stopped loving her." A profound silence enveloped them as Elena absorbed his words. She felt as though she had stepped into their story, a love that transcended distance and time. "Have you thought about reaching out to her?" she asked, her heart pounding with the weight of what she was suggesting. "I've wanted to, but I didn't know how to begin," Marco admitted, looking out the window toward the river. "I was afraid it was too late." Elena's heart swelled with a sense of purpose. "It's never too late for love," she said, her voice firm. "You should write to her. Tell her everything you feel." Marco turned to her, his expression shifting from despair to hope. "You're right. I've kept my feelings locked away for too long." He picked up his pen and began to write furiously in his notebook, pouring out his heart onto the pages. Elena watched in awe as he wrote, realizing she was witnessing a pivotal moment in someone's life, a moment of courage that could change everything. After what felt like an eternity, he set down his pen and looked up at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "I'm going to send this to her," he said, his voice steady. "Thank you for believing in me." As they left the library together, Elena felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. She had started this journey seeking answers about the letters, but she had found something far more significant, a connection to two souls intertwined by love and longing. Marco's courage had inspired her, and she realized that sometimes it took a little nudge from a stranger to find the strength to follow one's heart. With the setting sun casting a warm glow over the river, Elena felt hopeful for what was to come. As Marco prepared to send his letter to M, she knew their story was far from over. It was only just beginning.